It's been, forever and a day since you and I got to do a show together. What are we going to talk about today?
Going to talk about laziness.
You're an expert.
To get into it, ignorance is a problem in this world, and in most situations, people want to understand their misunderstandings and grow and learn. And I'm one of the things I've done as an atheist is I've tried to embrace my mistakes and learn from them, and it's an opportunity to get corrected and not be ignorant anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But what about willful ignorance? And that seems to be rampant in religious contexts, and it may be feeble-mindedness. That might be one of the causes, or it might be that people are just evil, or maybe they're just being lazy. So I wanted to explore that today. And that laziness seems to explain a lot more than just willful ignorance. So today, reading the Bible, one of the things that you find between Christians and atheists, is that, as a rule, atheists tend to know their Bible better, than most Christians. And I think that Christians just are content to have it spoon-fed to them in church, and they don't actually go crack it. Reading the Bible is a great path to atheism, and I highly recommend it. And if they were to read the Bible, they might have to confront the base evil nature of the religion and the contradictions in the Bible, and they might learn that it's a fictional period piece that's not a guide for operating in the real world. But so that may be why they're being lazy. What about learning Christian history? Why would Christian learn about the horrible history of Christianity? Well, why bother learning about witch burnings and inquisitions and persecution of Jews and other religious minorities? Why bother reading Martin Luther's On the Jews and Their Lies, which that served as the blueprint for the Holocaust? It's better, apparently, to be lazy and unfortunately complicit in those things. And what about learning science? Christians don't actually have to learn anything about science because they can just say God did it. God did it, and you don't need to learn anything. And why invest all that energy in scientific discovery when you can just appeal to the supernatural? How about taking care of the environment? You hear these things like man can't break what God created, or God will fix it in the second coming, or climate change is a hoax, or God said to have dominion over the earth. And all sorts of conspiracies about one world government and how climate change is going to push us towards the end times and all this crazy stuff. Unfortunately, fixing the environment is going to take a lot of effort, and conservative Christians are leading the charge against it. And could laziness be a part of that? And why try to make the world a better place anyway? You can just pray instead. It gives you the feeling that you've done something profound, but you've done nothing at all. And ultimately, it's a cop-out. God's in charge of the world, and if it's screwed up, it's his failed attempt at perfection, and why should it concern you? Also on the subject of prayer, the Bible says that you can pray. Jesus says you can pray for anything you want and get it. And so that begs the question: why do we still have the coronavirus? Why are we still dealing with that if you can just pray it away? Is it that Christians are too lazy to pray, or are they too lazy to test Jesus's claim? And I think it's the latter, because if they were actually to test it, they'd figure out the world doesn't work that way, and maybe the answer seems to be to pray and hope for some sort of answer, and only spend effort exerted in rationalizing why there's no response. How about, where does the money go to in your church? When Christians donate to church, do they check up on how the money's actually being used? Apparently not, because sex abuse is common in many denominations. And do Christians realize that they're complicit in funding those things if they're donating to the church and not demanding that those things be fixed? So in summary, maybe the best way for a Christian to be is lazy. Why go out of your way to fix the problems, and why not just wait here until God calls you home for your next life? So let's go on with calls, Matt.
Yeah, it's you're talking about it, and I get it. I thought one of the biggest things of laziness, because I was guilty of it as well, is something that you mentioned, which is not understanding and not bothering to look into or care about the history of the religion that you're a part of. What most Christians that I interacted with, including myself, did is, the preacher tells you stuff, and then when you have your revival meetings and stuff like that, or your guest preachers, they come in, or they'll point you to somebody like Josh McDowell, and here's a book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. But that stuff doesn't really go through the history, and most people don't pay that much attention to it. It's like merely knowing, here's a book. I have a signed copy of Evidence That Demands a Verdict downstairs. I forgot to bring it up, but being able to say, look, I've got a book, the Bible, and look, here's another book where a bunch of smart people have gone out and done all the homework for me to tell me that this other book is reliable. That's as far as they go. It's not like they've cracked the cover on it and studied it and tried to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Having a book is just sort of the beginning, because you have to read it, you have to understand it, you have to think about it critically and these sorts of things. And that takes work.
and curiously, the people who actually do that work, a good chunk of them become non-believers. I mean, it's one of the things that we see when you go to a seminary that includes textual criticism and studies like this. You find people, at a minimum, become less fundamentalist, and you get more of the liberal theology stuff. And in some cases, they just, give it up entirely. Not everybody. Certainly, there are some Christian theologians who know more about all of this than I ever will or ever care to. I mean, that's undeniable. But by and large, the average person sitting in a pew knows diddly squat about the history of their religion, how the Bible came to be, which is why they think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and that the Bible is one book handed down from God. It's bizarre.